Hello, my name is Rick Houston, and welcome to the Scene Vault Podcast, your source for all things NASCAR history. Presented by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace.
You couldn't drive around without seeing that old coupe modified somewhere out someone else's gas station. And you just knew when you're 4, 5, 6 years old, that's the world to you. Like 3 months after it happened, you see parts of the Darlington race, and in between figure skating and Chinese ping pong, and when you're a 6-year-old kid, it's like, son of a bee, man, I don't give two craps about ping pong, but and just seeing that thing, it's like, holy crap, man, that's Richie stuff. It's like I'm 16 years old and it was still like unfathomable,
The day NASCAR and all of us associated in any way with NASCAR forget its past, that's the day we don't have any future.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Waid.
And my name is Rick Houston, and welcome back to the Scene Vault Podcast, presented by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace, and a track that truly cares about NASCAR history. Now, Steve, I say that we're back with fingers crossed. Maybe possibly. I sure as heck hope so. Listeners, I apologize for the last couple of weeks. If ever there was a situation that was out of my hands and that I had no control over, that was it. I mean, we switched to a new RSS feed, which eventually I truly believe is going to be a really good deal for us. But obviously, there are still some kinks to be worked out. And given the last couple of weeks, that is much easier said than done.
Well, Rick, they say that everyone goes through growing pains. Let's just say these are ours.
Well, the fact of the matter is I was helpless in the whole thing because I'm not a tech guy. I'm not a computer guy. I am not an internet voodoo guy or anything like that. But this even had the people who work with this kind of thing every day. It had them stumped. Mm-hmm. And so basically, it's my understanding that they have had to go through and submit that new RSS feed to each individual platform, iTunes and Spotify and Google Podcasts and Podbean and all the different platforms that you can listen to a podcast on.
Well, think about it this way, Rick. We think we've got it bad, and probably we have, but those guys working for us have really got it bad. And I know that it is some time-consuming work they're doing.
And I appreciate their efforts.
Sure.
I mean, they didn't just blow this off. They were working as hard as they could work on it. So I appreciate what they're doing. But here's the crazy thing. The episode that dropped January 11th, that was the first week that we were on the new feed. That dropped without a hitch. No problem. It was out at 6 a.m. on that Wednesday, just like it always is. But then the final installment of our interview with the Petty brothers was to have released, as always, on Wednesday, January 18th. And that didn't happen. And then we made the call to just go ahead and postpone the release until the following Wednesday, last Wednesday on January 25th. And you had better believe that I was up at 6 o'clock that morning, watching that feed like a hawk and still nothing. But they went to work and it finally did start to show up. And now hopefully everybody can download this week's episode without a problem, just like they always have. I know that it's on iTunes. I know that it's on Spotify. That's the two that are the big ones for us. So just take a breath. It'll be all right. That's what I've kept telling myself over and over and over again. It'll be okay.
Keep on, listeners. We are out there.
We evidently did lose some followers on iTunes to the podcast, the subscribers of the podcast. So please go back and make sure that you're subscribed on iTunes, on Spotify, wherever that you listen to the podcast. Make sure that you are still subscribed or following or whatever. And hopefully the show is there from here on out. Steve, that's enough of that stuff. It's giving me a headache just talking about it. This week in the first segment, buckle up. Because we come barreling out of the gate in the first of what will be 3 installments of our interview with the legendary crew member, Steve Dluzniewski
That's easy for you to say.
Ooh, let's just call him Duze.
I agree. No way I'm going to say that name.
We come out barreling fast, and that interview never slowed down for the next 2 hours. The man is known far and wide in racing circles as Duze, and he tells us about his upbringing in the sport and his own short but memorable turn behind the wheel of a race car. And just when you think it's safe, Duze remembers his job as a bus driver into and out of both Boston and New York City. Did you like my attempt at the Boston accent?
No, not really, but I will
Boston?
say this. I will say this. If Deuce drives buses in Boston and New York City, I give him credit for one thing. He has got nerves of steel. Have you ever seen buses run through those towns? Holy smoke.
Well, let's just say that he had to kind of censor some of the stories that he could tell about. And if it's Duze doing the censoring, you know it's serious.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Then in our second segment, we're going to go back to the July 24th, 1997 issue of Winston Cup Scene. Dale Jarrett drives his Robert Yates Racing Ford to a dominant victory at Pocono, leaving Jeff Gordon's Chevrolet in the dust as he does so. Felix Sabates' good luck charms do not work in that event, while Ward Burton continues his recuperation from a brutal crash earlier in the month at Daytona. There's a brilliant reprinted column by the late Joe Whitlock on his long ago encounter with a young man seeking a lot of tickets to the World 600, a feature on the young up-and-coming Dale Earnhardt Jr., a photo bio and column on our old friend Duze, and finally, a letter to the editor from a former Max Race Cards employee in response to the recent destruction of 18 million cards due to the company's bankruptcy filing.
18 million cards they destroyed? Are you kidding me?
They destroyed 18 million, Steve. Listeners, if you possibly can, please consider supporting us on Patreon. That address is patreon.com/the Same Vault Podcast. Or if you would prefer to do a one-time show of support, you can do that via paypal.me/the Same Vault Podcast or venmo.com/the Same Vault Podcast. And just as a reminder, this show is not affiliated in any way with American City Business Journal's owner of the same brand. So, first of all, how do you pronounce your last name? Is it Dluzniewski?
Americanized, we've always said Dluzniewski.
Dluzniewski.
Now, if you wanted to be ethnic about it, you would be Dluzniewski. That's the Polish pronunciation.
Let's go with Dluzniewski.
Yeah, that's where the Deuce
Now say the Polish again.
Dluzniewski. And actually, in Polish, a male, I think, is Dluzniewski, but when you address the woman, she would be Dluzniewska. Panie was the female. Panie Dluz, like my baci, my grandmother. Panie Dluzniewska.
Now, is that something that you spoke in the home? Are your parents?
No.
Are you first generation?
No, my parents didn't speak Polish, but my father's mother and father did speak a fair amount. So
Okay.
it would have been my great grandparents that I believe were the immigrants.
So how did you pick it up from them?
Well, I don't speak Polish, but you're 5 years old, learning to spell Dluzniewski. You learn that. A lot of things ain't so hard after that,
All right, so you were talking before we started recording, and your dad was a racer.
Yeah, he local, Riverside Park Speedway, Agawam, Massachusetts. So he didn't. Well, he's like me. Had like a very, maybe a 4-week driving career, and then ended up with people driving his stuff, working on other people's stuff. Had the gas station, and back in the day, I mean, that's where the race cars were at, the gas station, and you couldn't drive around without seeing that old coupe modified somewhere out someone else's gas station, and you just knew when you're 4, 5, 6 years old, that's the world to you. You knew where that car was, or this, or if you were real lucky, he had to go get something from some guy or something, and man, there's Leo Maddie's number 92, and I'm sitting in the thing as a 5-year-old, and just the smell, the whole. It just sucks you in, and it's hard to break the habit.
So you were hooked right off the bat.
Yeah.
In racing.
Yeah, as a little kid. That's like I said, my dad wasn't into football and baseball and stuff. It was racing, and we're in Chicopee, Massachusetts, and he's doing his thing at Riverside Park Speedway. So. Well, it was Grand National back in the day. That was like unimaginable to us, but you knew it was there, and you paid attention. And him and his buddies, they used to actually go to Daytona, and I can only imagine them trips. And then they also did the deal where Daytona 500 was, what am I trying to say here? You had to go pay to see it on closed circuit TV, like at the local small coliseum or something. So that's what they would do.
Wow.
And so I'm young, and you'd get your 2-minute snippet on Wide World of Sports. You're sitting there waiting for Wide World of Sports come on, because think 3 months after it happened, you'd see parts of the Darlington race, and in between figure skating and Chinese ping pong, and when you're a 6-year-old kid, it's like, son of a bee, man, I don't give two craps about ping pong, but and just the commentary and stuff was so cool from them old deals. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
The drivers, you said in your photo bio that the drivers became larger than life to you.
Well, when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, you don't realize that the guy driving your dad's race car is an insurance salesman during the week. You don't know that. You just know that on Saturday night you're going to the track, and there they are, man, with the fire, and they didn't have fire suits like they do nowadays and stuff. And I mean, a guy with maybe his number or his name on his helmet with just a little bit of pinstriping or something. Or back in the day, they had a deal, it was the All-Star Circuit. I think O'Rourke and them guys were in on the deal, maybe Larry Mendelson or something. So you'd have 2 guys from your track and 2 of the hot dogs. And so all these tracks up there, I mean, they had dirt cars and stuff too, racing on. Sometimes they go run on the dirt. Most of these, I think Bright Bill, Gerald Chamberlain might have been on that stuff, and it's just a real cool deal. So they would have come once a year, and that'd be like a Tuesday or Wednesday night show, and you'd get to see all these guys you would never get to see. Freddie DeSaro in Bowler's 3 car, at Riverside. It's the only time they were there. They didn't race Riverside. They were running Stafford, and huge difference. I mean, only 20 miles away, but Stafford was big blocks on injectors and stuff. They were getting it done. And I saw one of them all-star races at Riverside, and Lou Lazaro, the monk, won. And he actually won. He won 2 all-star races. I believe the only 2 all-star races they had at Riverside over the years. Monk won both of them with a dirt car on modified. You just put the asphalt tires on a little. And so the one I saw, Monk won, and Freddie finished second in Bowler's car. So, I mean, where am I going to go see that nowadays?
Yeah. Now, how did you first get involved in the sport yourself?
Well, my father got out probably when I was 12, 13 years old. So there was a little lull in there, So you keep paying attention to it, but I'm not going to the track like I was. You know, your mom's not driving you there anymore or nothing. So then I'm like around 15, 16, didn't have a car yet. Friend of a friend, I start bumming a ride with them, and Rolling Bombardier, and God bless them, I just seen a deal popped up on some of my Facebook stuff, just a back marker from Chicopee, but good guys. Him and a guy, Bob Kelty, they had 2 old coupes that they ran out of this guy's garage in Chicopee at his house. So I start bumming a ride to the track with them, you know, just to go watch. So at the time, so it's like 78, because Richie Evans was running there weekly. And Cook was most of the time, too. I mean, sometimes they wouldn't show up because they were points chasing. But Richie had the deal where Friday night was Stafford, Saturday night Riverside, and Sunday they could usually go to Thompson. So he had, within not too far, there's 3 nights of racing for him. In Riverside, probably like 3 hours from Rome to Agawam, and the way they drove down the highway, possibly less.
Possibly.
And it's I'm friendly with Billy Nazowitz, so man, it's just I get them stories and stuff, because I remember like on a Sunday morning out towing. Well, I wasn't out towing, out doing something, and seeing their hauler parked at this. It's like an old motor lodge on Riverdale Road in West Springfield, and apparently that's where they stayed. I didn't know none of this stuff, till talking with, and just seeing that thing was like, holy crap, man, that's Richie's stuff. It's like I'm 16 years old and it was still like unfathomable, Yeah. So that was that, and so from there I get a little older, and then. And I worked for my dad, and you worked. There was none of this going away, racing with someone. You worked, So I built my own street stock in like, what the hell, maybe 82 or something. Me and a buddy of mine were going to, so I built this thing, and worst thing that ever happened, some guy that worked for my dad, he's like, oh, man, you're going to kill him. And you always do. It's racing's one of them armchair quarterback deals. I don't think – I don't care how many whiz-bang cameras, this, that, and especially nowadays, I think the fan base, a lot of them haven't been immersed in short track racing or not. So you don't understand what's involved till you get in there and do it. So I get this thing together, me and my buddy. So typical, my first race, I towed a thing to Thompson. And it's probably for the better. I get there late, typical. So this is a Sunday show. So I have the tech guy go, Pete, I can't remember his last name. He did Thompson and Stafford. Well, you needed a little this, a little that. So I had no business going out at Thompson anyway, so that worked out good. So I show up on a Friday, the following Friday at Stafford. Like nowadays, you go test, and you test, and then you test some more. And then you have 8 days of practice for a 50-lap. This stuff was here. You rolled up. If you got 5 laps in practice, that was it. So I get there, and this is Stafford. And then the way I pulled in and was parked at the gate, some guy comes out yelling at me. And it's crazy because Ryan Priest's dad, Jeff, he was starting around the same time within a few. And he went through the same crap at Stafford, like, man, well, just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. You don't got, So they were in a hurry that night. For some reason, they had I don't know what the deal was. So you pull out a Stafford in turn 1 is where you get on the track. So what they did, they had the pace car stopped and the exit of turn 2. You lined up behind it and brought you down for the green flag. So I got no laps, no nothing. I'm starting last in this car and this heat, which the setup on it was this is a street stock, my 70 Chevelle. And my uncle at the gas station, well, he had worked on a Tuesday night. They used to run Tuesday nights, a late model and hobby division at Riverside Park. He had worked on a hot rod there, you know, la. So he sets the car up for me out on one of the gas pump islands at the gas station, brings out the torch. Stock springs and he just heats him up till the thing's sitting a certain way. And he gets in, he does a burnout with it and tells me I'm good to go. Hey man, I'm good to go. I got the So we come around, get the green flag. I'm, you know, I got 340 gear. I didn't know nothing. Didn't know anything about anything. On a recap tires, you know, you're running on recap street stock tires back then. So they dropped the flag. I was saying, I'm on 340 gear in the rear. I didn't know nothing. You're running like a 510, 513 there. Well, I don't know this stuff, you know. Yeah. So I hit the gas. You ain't hardly going anywhere. And there's a big skirmish ahead of me. Like, I mean, cars everywhere. Someone got turned. Well, I drove through the middle of it. So I'm going like from, you know, there's probably back then 12, 14 cars in a heat. I go from like last to like third. And I'm thinking, man, this is easier than I thought, you know? I didn't realize the only reason I made it through is because I was going so slow. And then I got to the corner, and I just drove that thing in there, and I, you know, like you literally feel it like on the right front. Just I had no power, no power steering. Because I thought power steering was for sissies. I mean, it's how dumb I was, you know, not much smarter these days, but it's just the attitude you had. That, well, yeah, the guy told me, you got big balls, man, just send it in there. Well, that's what I did. And by the time I found the backstretch, I think every car in the wreck had already got restarted and passed me. So I get her down to turn 3, dump her in again, and the rear springs fell out of the car because it was laid so far over on the right front, like the rear end was coming off the ground. And in the rear view mirror, even though the thing was vibrating, I see the rear springs go over the fence.
And this is your first lap?
This is it, my first lap of racing. Like, you know, like, oh, man, and they're gone. You know, like the pack is gone, and you're out there. Like the most, so like, I went from hero to zero, and like now I'm like, holy crap, man! These guys are serious. It's only street stock racing, but they're serious. Yeah. Like, you know, the front runners and stuff. So like, holy cow! So then my wiring starts burning up under the dash. So I come down pit road and I just reach under there grabbing at wires. No gloves, no nothing. It burnt like stripes in my hand and what from the hot wires. And the pit reporter comes up and sticks a microphone in my face. So, all right.
You don't have a recording of that, do you?
No, I mean, I would pay huge money for to watch that stuff. My point being, you're so bad, most people would have quit. So, you know, the heat race is over. So now I'm going to run I was too embarrassed to go and find my springs. And I used to I was towing to the track with an old tow truck. Just lift the car by the rear end, put a couple street tires on the front. So, well, the guy next to us, he's like, well, man, just, you know, took the record chains and chained the rear end to the frame rails. But we were real smart because we left some for, you know, so I'd have a little travel. Yes, I got no springs in the rear. I go out for the consi. Same thing, dumps on the right front. And now with the rear end chained to the chassis, it's lifting the left rear off the ground. I mean, it was like the dumbest crap you ever seen in your life. And that's literally how I started, just little by little. And back then, but I knew I weren't like these kids nowadays. I would start last. I wouldn't take my handicap spot or nothing, start last, have my private battle back there with 3 other junkers. And when I knew the leaders were coming, the people in the infield, they were in danger. That's how far I got out of the way. You don't junk up the leader's race. You know that from having been at the racetrack, all your life basically. So it was pretty comical. Then a friend of a friend was, hey, this guy blew a motor, man. If he can drive your car for a few weeks, he'll get you going a little better and stuff. And then I never took him out of the car. And, a year later, we were winning races, having success. But, yeah, most people would have quit. It was that bad.
Now, did you actually drive a bus in New York City? Because in your photo bio, you said that you moved south because you got tired of driving a smelly bus.
Yeah.
In and out of New York City.
My last, because I was towing, my dad sold the gas station. We were out of there in end of 85. So, so I'm kind of bumming. Got the car at one guy's garage, another guy's car, garage, la, 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 la. Till finally moved. My grandmother died, and I moved in with my grandfather. And he had this little one-car garage. So I moved my racing operation in there, which it was so small you could barely get both axles out of the car at the same time. That's how, actually ran successfully out of there. But so then friend of a friend deal, I end up, to keep some more money towing. Unless you were really like towing for the cops and stuff up there, the towing business. And back in the day, people didn't have credit cards like they do now and this and that. Dealerships were closing. Some of them old gas stations were closed, so I weren't making much money. So I get this job driving a Peter Pan bus. So if anybody that's watching this from the northeast quarter, they've seen the Peter Pan buses on the road. They're a very hugely successful bus line out of Springfield, Mass, which the guy, he's long past, Peter Picknelly Sr., back in the day, he started a deal with one kind of sort of bus running between Springfield and Boston, turned it into a small empire. Stuff like that.
What is your most interesting bus driving story?
Well, my most interesting ones, if you are intent upon keeping your office here and whatnot, we can't get into.
Okay, all right.
But
okay,
I'll try and tone this one down. Like I said, I'm making $7.12 an hour. This one night, wheel up on the curb. Greyhound, and from the very back, I was looking for my gold piece. And there's stuff used to go on in the back few seats of these late night runs.
Whatever could that be?
I'm looking for my gold piece. I'm like, all right, no biggie here. And I'm waiting. I see him, kerfuffling in the back and whatnot. So finally, I'm like, ma'am, wait about 5 minutes. Ma'am, I need to be rolling here, You move this bus, I effing kill you. And you're like $7.12 an hour. So I gassed that. I shut the door and I jumped on the gas. And I'm looking and I did mess up because I'm looking in the mirror. Here she comes up the aisle, and I'm like, oh no. And I think it's Copley Square or something up there. Boston isn't like New York where it's all gridded out at most of it's 90 degrees to each other. This intersection in Boston is like comes in from like 6 different ways at all different angles. And at this hour of the morning, it's all blinking lights. Ain't as much. So as I was getting up to that intersection, I was like, what do I do now? Just comes a kook. Oh, and she actually got to me. So she's behind me with one hand on grabbing the steering wheel and stuff. I'm like, $7.12 an hour. So I'm looking, and just my luck, a cop was coming from my left. So I dragged the brake, hoping, and he did. He went across my nose, you know? So I'm like, all right. So as he came across my nose, I took a 90-degree right to get behind him. In the meantime, so this going on, girl sitting in the seat right behind me. You crazy bitch, I'm effing pregnant. Yelling at the girl that's trying to commandeer the bus. It's like, you just, ay. So the cop, he wheeled it right to the curb. I pulled in behind him, flipped the door open. He literally grabbed me out of the seat, threw me out on the curb, goes in with the gun up in the air. I'm like, you know, just like in the movies. And within 30 seconds, 3 more cruisers come piling in with the lights rolling and this and that. And that woman, she had come up the aisle with her gentleman. So we start getting this thing sorted out on the side of the road in Boston, you know, early in the morning. And the cop, I said, look, man, I just told them what happened, and away I went, and up the aisle they come. So he says, brings me back, and, well, can you identify him? And I looked, and there's, you know, 5 or 6 black guys in the bus. 5 of them had done nothing but sleeping, you know. So I'm like, man, I don't know which one it is. I'm not just going to finger some of her. So that girl's sitting behind me. It was him. All right, it was him. So now they got me back in the driver's seat. Cop takes that guy outside the door, starts questioning him. And one of the questions he asked the guy, have you ever been arrested before? The guy, what for? Assault and battery. So I'm like, oh, no. So cop comes back in the bus. You want to press charges, this and that. Like, you know, I'm like, no, I didn't file no incident report or nothing, because I'm not supposed to be dropping them. I'm really doing the company a favor, dropping these guys off at Greyhound, but you're really not supposed to be there, and you're getting off on your prescribed route and all of that. So I said, no, man, just get them gone. And down the road I went to my stop with the 4 or 5 people left, and then I'm sitting there, you know, trying to sleep in the bus a little, and like, well, man, that's only 2-3 miles down the road. What if these guys, you know, figure out and come looking for me? And so that was one of them, without you know, getting into the graphic ones in New York City.
No, we're good. We're good.
Yeah, we're good.
So from your photo bio, you said that your most embarrassing moment was a mid-1980s incident at Riverside Park where you used the trunk of the race car to store the night's stash of beer.
Oh, yeah, because, again, I'm towing this to the track with a tow truck. Lift the car up by the rear, you know, street tires on the front. And, man, I was getting a little bigger by then, so I had like a spare transmission. Yeah. And cooler full of beer, and I would stick them in the trunk of the race car, you know, because I had some trunk floor. You're supposed to have full trunk floor. I had like the bare minimum in there to get the thing through tech and whatnot. And I send the driver out for warm-ups, and I forgot to take the stuff out. So like at Riverside, you run from the back stretch into the infield during your warm-ups, watch your car for, 6, 7, 8 laps. And so I'm looking and like, man, what the heck? Because I see the track crew, both ends of the track, like pointing out into the corners. And I look, and it's my beer, my 16-ounce Knickerbockers. And they're all in the corners, like spinning, shooting off geysers. And I'm like, gosh, shit, So I go, no radios or nothing, which, quite frankly, I think in them divisions, the racing was a whole lot better without the radios. And, now you got these little swingsters with the hair and the sunglasses and the junior spotter pack. We didn't have that. You're like... So he comes wheeling in. I hope, thankfully the tranny didn't fall out, And there's my cooler of beer laid over on the side, 90% empty. And they're all spinning around on the track. Like, oh, crap, get it back to the truck. And I believe at the same time, the driver's brother got caught up top trying to sneak in because he didn't know how to do it like we knew how to do it. So I got beer on the track. I got a kid trying to sneak in, and and that was God bless him and whatnot. Ben Dodge, who if I had a track today, he'd be the promoter. I didn't always get along with him and whatnot, but come over. One more time. So it's like your parents. You're on your 30th. One more time and you're done. So I was very thirsty that night.
Did you actually work for Richie Evans?
No, I did not. I did not know Richie from Adam. It was like I said, 16, 17 years. I didn't start with my own car till I was like, 19 or 20 years old. But you're 16 or 17, and like I said, you'd see that operation, cube van with I think it was the Unger Wilhelm U&W trailer or something. So the cube van with the trailer, and sometimes they'd have Big Orange and whatnot, but just that cube van with the trailer. And they had that cool, like a nice car cover. They were like they were like canvas with the nice line, and that was just like wow. So I never knew Richie. I met him like in the bar, like at the clubhouse at Thompson or something. It was like back then, you just were happy to be in the same bar as that crew, So I did not know him. I ended up befriending Richie Jr., 10, 12 years ago. So that's my connection to the family there. And I should have brought it. I got a picture where I'm 16 years old hanging on the fence at Riverside when he's in Victory Lane. It's just a cool deal to have,
Taking the checkered flag and driving to victory lane is the goal for any racer. It tells the competition, my accomplishments resulted in a trip to the winner's circle. It's no different as a business owner, team leader, or coach. Recognizing those deserving is what we do every day at 5-Star Awards and Engraving. Hi, race fans. This is Bob Laird, Director of Sales at 5-Star and former jackman for Buddy Arrington back in the 80s. Laser engraved and full-color corporate awards, as well as crystal, plaques, trophies, and promotional products are just some of a sample of what we offer at 5-Star. With state-of-the-art equipment in our North Carolina facility, let our experienced graphic artists take you from idea to concept and ultimately the finish line. To view our beautiful and unique designs, please visit us at 5starawards.net. The entire project can be completed online. Please reach out to me at bob.laird@5starawards.net. 919-954-1130. As a thank you, everyone who contacts me will receive at no charge a collection of NASCAR memorabilia featuring Richard Petty, while supplies last. That's bob.laird@5starawards.net, 919-954-1130.
This segment is brought to our listeners by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace. Steve, this is how I first became a Steve Dluzniewski fan.
Why don't you just say Deuce?
Well, his name is Dluzniewski.
Okay.
If you say it fast, it's kind of like one of those Bible names in the Old Testament. If you say it real fast, hopefully nobody notices you mangling it.
That's about the only way to do it.
July 24th, 1997 issue of Winston Cup Scene. The photo bio is on Duze. And let me tell you, it was a doozy.
Oh, gosh.
You get it?
Yeah.
You see what I did there?
Yeah. Let's move on.
The photo bio started with a quote from Deuce. The only thing I knew on Saturday nights as a kid was to hop in mom's station wagon, piss on minivans, give me an old country squire any day, and head off to the local short track. It was rough and tumble, hardcore racing. Them guys were larger than life to me. Saturday night made everything right. My own weekly racing career was really my opportunity to live out what captivated me as a kid. Winning meant little without the beer drinking, fighting, and run ins with track officials. It could be that the worst part of my job is the really fun stuff isn't politically correct at this level. We had better move on from that real quick.
I agree.
Just reading that quote and listening to that quote, you can tell that Deuce truly does have a love for this sport.
Oh, yeah. And especially at the grassroots level. I mean, talk about beer drinking, fighting, runs with track officials. That's exactly where it is. And he's just a big part of it.
Deuce's favorite foods, he said, were steak, shrimp, Eastern kielbasa, but I'm usually eating macaroni and cheese.
Eastern kielbasa. I like him already.
Favorite recording artists, Beatles, Janis Joplin, and all the blues I can get.
Now, there's a man after my own heart. I am a lover of the blues.
Hobby, I'm a sax and harmonica player with the Cash Money Band, a local blues act. Most memorable moment in racing, July 1993, working for Jimmy Air Horton at Talladega when he left the track the hard way.
Oh, I remember that. Jimmy just sailed right over that wall at Talladega.
Steve, if you think that you liked Deuce before, listen to what he said was the best part of his job. Free beer, at least for now.
I'm really liking this guy.
Are you sure you two weren't separated at birth? Toughest parts of my job, no windows or good music in the shop. Heroes, Ivan Baldwin, Richie Evans, and Bobby Stefanik.
Those three guys did not take any guff, I can tell you that.
If I could change anything about myself, and this is where most of the answers tended to start looking alike. If I could change anything about myself, most people said, like me, they'd like to lose weight or something along those lines. But no. Oh, no, not Deuce. What Deuce wanted to change about himself, I'd make my nose smaller and visit the family more. If I could change anything about others, I'd have them lighten up. 5 years from now, I hope the beer is still free. Personality traits I admire in a person. And again, there were a lot of look-alike answers here. A large majority said personality traits they admire in a person, honesty. Personality traits they dislike in a person, dishonesty. With Deuce, however, survey says about personality traits they admire most in a person, simple values. Personality traits he hates in a person, limp-sized egos.
Oh, there's a lot of people in racing he might hate. Give it the blimp-sized ego thing.
You said that? I did not. If he couldn't be in racing, I'd hit the road playing the blues. Occupation I most admire, DJ at the nudie bar. People assume I'm under the influence or crazy.
I can sort of see why.
What drives me crazy? Too many profilers in the garage. I hope I never have to pay for the beer. And finally, last but not least, every New Year's, I resolve to get a date. The 90s hasn't really been my decade. Under marital status, Deuce had said that he was single, but encouraged ladies who might be interested to send photos. So here's what you need to know about Deuce. Give him some good beer, good music, and good racing, and he is good to go. Deuce's daddy, Daddy Deuce, had a gas station in Agawam, Massachusetts, and growing up around gas stations in that area at that time meant growing up around race cars.
Yeah, I think the modified driver, Rennie Charland, was from Agawam, Massachusetts, and he was the personal favorite of mine.
Listen to you throwing around some modified knowledge.
We got to be pretty good friends. Every time we come to Martinsville, we'd really cut up together. Rennie was the guy that gave me my nickname back then, Nutsy Fagan.
Nutsy Fagan.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Sasquatch. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. again, you could hear the love for the sport in his voice. Racing is a part of his DNA. Now, of course, Deuce had to try his hand at driving, so he goes to Thompson with a 1970s Chevelle street stock. It is not nearly ready to race, so he takes it to Stafford the next week. He doesn't get a single lap of practice before the field rolls onto the track for his heat race, and you can kind of already see what's coming. As soon as the green flag comes out, there's a big wreck ahead of him, and somehow miraculously, like Moses in the Red Sea, the waters part. And just like that, Deuce goes from dead last to about third or so. And he's like, this is easy. Well, the story doesn't end there. Unfortunately, Deuce is thinking, I'm Richie Evans here. I'm flying. Well, what he didn't realize was that he had missed the wreck because he was too slow and not right in the middle of the pack that was fighting for position. So then he's getting passed back by cars that had been involved in the spin. He goes into turn 3 and the rear springs fall out of the car. He looks in his rear view mirror and sure enough, there go the springs up and over the wall. Kind of like Jimmy Horton. Then the wiring under the dash starts to smoke. So he pits and he's grabbing it with his bare hands, trying to yank it out of there. He goes into the consolation with no rear springs in the car. So they chain the rear end of the car to the frame rail. Then that causes the left rear to lift off the ground going through the turns. And needless to say, Deuce does not win his first race.
This is something out of a Jerry Lewis movie. There's a guy out there. All of a sudden, his springs fall out and he sees him bouncing over the wall. So he nearly panics and they go into the pits after everything starts smoking. They chain the rear end of the car to the car. And the left rear lifts up every time. Can't you see that?
Yes, I can.
Slapstick comedy. That's great.
Deuce drove a bus from Springfield, Massachusetts to Boston in the wee early morning hours. It's about a 90-mile trip each way, and you can just imagine some of the things that Deuce saw and experienced while working that gig. And Steve, I have to ask, I truly do not know the answer to this. What's the one job that you worked during your younger days that might surprise people today?
I sold magazine subscriptions door to door.
Did you really?
I did. And let me tell you, when you knock on a door and that door opens, you never really know what you're going to see. Oh, me.
Now, what kind of magazines were you selling? Were you any good at
Any type.
All right.
We had a whole list of magazines that we sold subscriptions to. We gave them a completely bogus sales pitch. And the so-called manager of ours came up behind us to seal the deal. I don't know how he did it, but the speech we gave them was just completely out of nowhere. Had nothing to do with what was going on, just to get them interested in buying a magazine subscription.
Now, how old were you at the time?
16, 17,
Okay.
somewhere in that range.
All right. Well, I've got 2 or 3
I'm not
jobs
surprised.
I did
I'm not
once upon a time. I washed dishes for one night and one night only at a Chinese restaurant while I was in high school.
You sure you didn't eat off those dishes before you washed them?
How did I know you were going to go there? Let's just say that eating in a Chinese restaurant and working in a Chinese restaurant are 2 entirely different things.
I'm sure.
I also worked at McDonald's in high school. And then after my first official job in racing didn't pan out, I went back to that same location and worked for several months. And then I made what I thought was going to be a step up the ladder and went to work as a telemarketer for this little fly-by-night, quote-unquote, Christian book company.
Uh-oh.
You're going to have to give me a moment. That gives me PTSD, man. The book that we were selling was called The Bible Incorporated, and it basically took bits and pieces of scripture and combined them to form what was supposedly this visionary plan for people in the workforce. But telemarketer, holy cow, man. That was far and away, no 2 ways about it, the worst job I've ever had. I would get literally sick with headaches every day. I quit that one for my health, but also I quit that one to move to North Carolina for good, to pursue getting into racing. And I finally rolled on back to North Carolina. And that's when I slept in my car at Martinsville and snuck food out of the press box, then hit rock bottom and went hungry at North Wilkesboro the next week.
And now we know the rest of the story.
But it was not driving a bus into or out of Boston and or New York City.
Hey race fans, John Dodson here from NASCAR Technical Institute. NASCAR Tech is open and enrolling, with classes starting every 3 to 6 weeks. In our 48-week automotive technology program, students learn everything from vehicle electronic technology to diagnostics and drivability. And as our exclusive educational provider for NASCAR, we offer a 15-week NASCAR elective where students learn engines, fabrication, aerodynamics, pit crew essentials, and more. NASCAR Tech also offers 36-week welding and CNC machining training programs so you can choose the path that best fits your career goals. Ready to see how you can get started? Visit uti.edu/NASCAR today.
NASCAR Technical Institute prepares graduates to work as entry-level automotive service technicians. Some graduates who take NASCAR-specific electives also may have job opportunities in racing-related industries. NASCAR Tech is an educational institution and cannot guarantee employment or salary. This segment is brought to our listeners by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace. July 24th, 1997 issue of Winston Cup Scene. Dale Jarrett dominated the Pennsylvania 500 at Pocono, leading the event 5 times for a total of 108 laps. Jeff Gordon, who finished in the runner-up spot, 2.948 seconds behind DJ, had the next highest number of laps led. He led 5 times for a total of 53 circuits. It was the 6th time in that season's first 18 races that Dale Jarrett had led the most laps. DJ said after the race, the engine was just incredible. Even when I'd mess up a little bit or my car was a little bit tight, I could still get down the straightaway. It's almost unfair that thing was so good. This is the type of race car I like to have, and I think most people do. It wasn't incredible on new tires, but it didn't fall off much either. It just stayed very predictable. We made some minor changes all day long. It was just awesome. Now, if I'm a Chevrolet driver and I had just gotten my behind kicked by a Ford like that, you know what? I'd have to agree that it was almost unfair that DJ's Robert Yates Racing Ford was that good that day.
Well, I would be feeling the same way, but this is not the first time that DJ had such a powerful car. Robert Yates engines were really superior at that time, and more times than not, if there was a problem in DJ's car, it didn't have anything to do with the engine. The engines were always solid, always powerful, and in this case, at Pocono, it just showed how effective that could be.
Jeff Gordon said there was really only one good car out there today. That was about as perfect as we've ever had our car here. The setup was great. We couldn't compete. We were in a different class. DJ's crew found a small cross on the ground in front of their car on the starting grid, and they taped it to the roll bar of the car before the race began. That apparently worked for DJ, but the trick that Felix Sabates tried most definitely did not. Felix apparently believed that monkeys bring good luck, although I've always heard that getting the monkey off your back was a good thing. At any rate, Felix had stuffed monkeys placed in each of his 3 cars in that race. Here's how that went, Steve.
Okay.
On the pace lap. On the pace lap, Robbie Gordon had to pit for a broken oil pump belt, and he wound up not even completing a single lap under green. He was credited with dead last, 42nd in the 42-car field. Wally Dallenbach was doing okay in the event until the engine blew in his Sabco car on lap 158. Joe Nemechek started from the pole position and led once for an 11-lap stretch, but got caught up in a multi-car crash on lap 127. Joe promptly threw the stuffed monkey in his car out the window during a subsequent pit stop.
Well, it sounded like Joe had good reason. Let me tell you something, Rick. Years ago, I was fortunate enough to visit Felix at his home in Charlotte. Of course, it was a very elegant, opulent house, no question. But his entire living room and dining area was decorated by monkeys of all kinds. I'm talking crystal monkeys. I'm talking antique monkeys. I'm talking about monkeys painted and mounted on the wall. And I asked Felix about it back then, and he told me that he believed monkeys gave you good luck. And he said, based on what's happened to me in my life, I have to believe it. So I'm going to make use of it as much as I can. Well, in racing, I don't think monkeys were quite the good luck piece Felix thought they might have been.
I did not know that. Now, that's the kind of information that you get here on the Scene Vault podcast.
And let me tell you, some of those monkeys in his home were worth a very pretty penny.
Well, I think it's at this point that I should introduce the podcast world to my pet stuffed monkey, Hearsay.
Should have named him Sasquatch. No, never mind.
All right, Nutsy Fagan, settle down. Settle down, Nutsy. In all the years that Jeannie served on the bench as a district court judge, she had opposition in an election once in 2008. And the less that I say about that, the better. That was a bad year. I was back on the road with NASCAR at the time doing some freelance work with TNT, their broadcast of the NASCAR races. And so Jeannie and I got a stuffed monkey, and we called him Hearsay. And I started taking photos of him all over the United States with a little sign that said, vote for Jeannie. From New Hampshire to Michigan to Sears Point, Hearsay was on the campaign trail that year. So that was pretty cool. Well, Jeannie won the election, and then Hearsay got serious about traveling. He went to my NASA book editor who lives in Australia. He did a tour of duty in Iraq with my cousin Matt, who then took him to Germany. He went to Northern Ireland with one of my co-authors on my first NASA book project. He has been to Africa, Israel, Canada, on board the Space Shuttle Atlantis while in the orbiter processing facility at Kennedy Space Center. He's been on the shuttle launch pad. He rode with Jason Keller during a race at Charlotte.
I'd say Hearsay's been around.
Well, he's basically been retired. You know, after all that way, I would hate for something to happen to my buddy Hearsay.
And I hope nothing happens to a world traveler like him.
There is a restart with 1 lap to go in the Pepsi 400 at Daytona a couple of weeks before this event. And yes, that was the race that John Andretti won. Jamie Bishop, I would never forget you, my buddy, my friend, my pal. That was the race that John Andretti won and that Jamie Bishop won. Ward Burton was still feeling the after effects of a multi-car crash in turn 3 moments after that green flag came out. Ward said that it was the hardest hit that he had ever taken in a race car to that point. Ward had made that dive below the yellow line on the backstretch at Daytona. Then he got together with Mark Martin and Dick Trickle, and after they came back down the racetrack, Derek Cope plowed into Ward hard between turns 3 and 4. And there are photos of Ward laying flat on his back in the grass with his brother Jeff standing over him, checking to see if he was okay. Ward said, "That's the hardest I've ever hit, and I dadgum sure don't want to do it again. I never had bruised ribs before, so I didn't know if I had stomach problems or not. I couldn't sit up in the hospital. They x-rayed my stomach and all that, and come to find out it was my ribs, specifically my floating ribs down at the very bottom at the side of the rib cage. They're really bruised. My neck is stretched, and I've got a bump on my forehead because of the helmet hitting the steering wheel. All in all, the seat in the car and the belts, everything did like it's supposed to. It was just a terrific impact. I've never even come close to hitting anything so hard before."
But when it comes to the circumstances, they were at the worst for Ward. Ricky, if you've seen this, guys get involved in an accident, okay? And they start to scramble around and slow down. And when you reach a point where they're slowed down, they seem to be, everything's going to be all right, and then get hit again.
Yes.
Harder by another car. That's where the problem really starts with the driver.
I think one of the most terrifying things for a race car driver would have to be turn driver's side to oncoming traffic and seeing a car come like that.
Yeah.
Ward wasn't T-boned. I think he was hit in the rear of the car, but still, that was just a terrific impact. And again, Ward Burton is one of those who felt like all the safety features that were coming into use in the late 1990s, early 2000s, he'd already survived crashes like this. So why does he need all this newfangled stuff? This was Scene's 20th anniversary year, and this issue reran a 1991 column by, Joe Whitlock. And this one is solidly in my top 5 of all-time most favorite Whitlock columns ever in Scene. So this kid had waited for 20 minutes outside Joe's office at Charlotte Motor Speedway in the late 1970s when he was finally ushered in. Need some infield tickets for Sunday's race. Nothing fancy, no pit passes, just plain old infield tickets. And Joe looked at this poor kid and said that shouldn't be a problem. And he rolled off 5 tickets off the wad that he had on him. And Joe goes, "Will these help?" And the teenager said, "Well, not exactly. See, it's a long story, but I need 40 tickets." And you can just imagine Joe's reaction. 40? That's crazy. Well, you see, it's like this. It's the 4th quarter, and the game is tied. I'm the quarterback, and I went into the huddle and told the guys if they'd help me win the game, I'd take everybody on the team to the World 600. Well, we got lucky and won the game, and they didn't forget my promise. I guess they figure my daddy can get anything he wants, but you know him, he never asked for anything. I'm broke, and all these guys have already borrowed an old bus to take to the game. They'll kill me if I don't get them into the race. Man, you've got to help me.
Well, I now know who this is, by the way.
Joe gave the young man the tickets, but added, "Humpy's going to kill me." And this kid grinned and said, "Hey, believe me, Humpy will never know. This is just between you and me, and I won't forget it either." Now, this is not the end of the story. This is the best part. The next day, this kid comes back in and said, "You promised me 5 tickets." He needed the 5 tickets that Joe had originally offered him on top of the 40 that he'd already gotten. And at that point, Joe was like, "What the heck? Just turn him over." And so the kid responds, "Great. Now the manager and trainers can come with the rest of the guys on the team." All right. Now, I have intentionally left this person's name out to this point.
I don't think you have to anymore.
Quarterback on his high school football team, other kids thinking that his daddy could get anything he wanted. Do you know who the teenager was?
Oh, I do.
Who was it?
Kyle Petty.
You would be correct, sir. Kyle Petty once bummed 45 tickets to the Charlotte World 600 off of Joe Whitlock. And the adult Kyle had actually been after Joe to write a book about racing, to which Joe responded in this column, "I think I will," right after his high school football team holds a big reunion and sticks him with the tab. He can afford it now. This column originally ran in the March 21st, 1991 issue of Winston Cup Scene, and Joe died just a few weeks later on May 5th. And Steve, his death robbed the world of more Joe Whitlock columns, but also apparently it also possibly robbed the world of a book about racing.
Yeah.
By Joe Whitlock.
Of course, at that time and that day in May 1991, it hit all of us at Scene very, very hard, but we weren't the only one. Joe Whitlock had a huge amount of fans. He had a lot of respect among the racing community, and it was just a terrible loss.
Steve, you know what I would do if I was in charge of the Scene brand? One of the first things I would do, I would put together a specialty publication of all Joe Whitlock columns.
That would be a good one.
But also, just as a reminder, this podcast is not associated. Never mind. There is a fantastically well-written piece on Dale Earnhardt Jr. in this issue. This story seems like it puts you right next to Dale Jr. as he begins his steady rise to fame and fortune in this sport. I mean, this thing is a masterpiece.
Well, thank you, Rick. I appreciate that.
Ha ha ha. Junior said in this story, calling me Dale, I haven't earned that. I don't reckon. I'm sure people automatically think we've got real good equipment and think that the car is capable of running at the top of the heap. I think Kyle Petty is happy with his life. Nobody's going to do what Dale Earnhardt done. Nobody's going to do what Richard Petty's done. It's the same way with all the second generation drivers. I hope we can be successful enough to just make a living at it. If I can just make a living at racing, I'll be happy with myself, no matter how many races we win or what races we win. Of course, I want to go out and win. That's what we go to the races for. But it's not going to bother me one bit if I don't win 7 championships or 2 championships. Steve, do you think that Dale's able to squeak by on what he makes a year now?
I'll tell you one thing, though. That was a very mature perspective of a racing career by Dale back then when he was so young. He just put everything in the proper order of what should be done. He was not over anxious. He was not reaching too far. He was not dreaming. He was practical, and that paid off.
In addition to the epic photo bio on Duze in this issue, that one very short little weekly feature simply couldn't hold all the Duze goodness that was to be had. So, of course, I did my column on all the other good stuff for no other reason than I did not want it to be lost on the editing room floor. One of the standard questions on the photo bio was always, what's your fantasy? Let's just say that Duze did not disappoint. I'm rich, huge fantasy. I move into an exclusive neighborhood and let the lawn grow up to the windows. I drive a rusted out pickup truck that smokes excessively. Aerosmith, the Allman Brothers, etc. play at my pool parties. The neighbors hate me, but their wives and daughters can't get enough of me at the parties. Oh, dear. And Deuce wasn't even close to being finished. Don King. Yep, the Don King with the big hair. Buys a Winston Cup team. I'm the general manager. The desk job I've been waiting for. No profiling, let's just say women, on our pit box. That's where James Brown and Tina Turner performed during the race. The pit crew dresses like the Commodores or Earth, Wind, and Fire. Their style revolutionizes pit stops as we know them.
Duze is out there, isn't he? I like that stuff, though.
The transporter, Duze. What about the transporter? A brightly colored transporter? Hell no. Ours is jet black with gold rims and a Crown air freshener on the dash. One in the race car, too. 10 guys shoved into a minivan? Not here. Plenty of Eldorado rentals for the crew. Cadillac records his first ever Winston Cup win. And to top it off, Spike Lee brings my life story to the silver screen. Now that is racing.
And that's what I call very wild fantasy, Rick. But you know something? It's pretty well thought out.
Oh, but wait. There's more.
Oh, no.
Deuce mentioned one other fantasy, but we better not repeat it here on the family show. Let's leave it at this. It involved a 12-pack of Red Dog beer and a can of whipped cream. Hello.
Uh-oh.
Okay, moving right along.
Yeah.
Finally, in this issue, there is a letter to the editor that was in response to a news item the month before that reported that 18 million Max race cards had been destroyed as a result of the company's bankruptcy. The writer of this letter to the editor was Jill Santuccio, who had served as Max's public relations representative. And what she said in this letter was nothing short of heartbreaking. Jill said that she had already left the company when Mac's employees were, in her words, all told on a Friday not to bother coming in the next Monday. No paycheck, no back vacation pay, no severance. Goodbye.
That is very cold.
One of them was a father of 5 girls, the older 2 of whom were in college, and his wife didn't work outside the home. Almost all of them had children. They all had bills to pay. Here is what's so stunningly unbelievable to me. 18 million cards were destroyed, and they're still so common that they'll never be worth much, if anything. The very same thing happened with baseball cards in the late 1980s and early 90s. They were so mass-produced, and so many different companies had licenses that the era is now referred to as the junk wax era. One of the things that Sandy Estep has given me over the years is an unopened set of Max's first ever set in 1988. And at one time, she called that set her retirement fund.
Not quite.
I'll never open it, but only because it was hers and the sentimental value that it has. But let me say that again, Steve. 18 million cards. Million. And they're still as common as grains of sand on the beach.
Makes you think, Greg, what were they thinking? What were they thinking? I don't know.
This is Steve Dluzniewski, and you are listening to the Scene Vault Podcast.
Hello, Scene Vault fans. This is Brian from Speedway Screens, and if you're enough of a NASCAR historian to be listening to this podcast, there's a good chance a piece of the past you've been on the hunt for is in my shop. I'm constantly on the hunt for apparel and collectibles from all genres and eras of motorsports, so whether it be cup cars, dirt modifieds, dragsters, or monster trucks, I've probably got something for you. Check out my inventory at speedwaytsj.etsy.com, and be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Speedway Screens for the newest items as soon as they drop, and for a peek at what I keep for my own collection. As a special thank you to listeners of this show, just enter SCENE at checkout for 10% off. speedwaytsj.etsy.com. That's speedwaytsj.etsy.com.
This podcast has been brought to our listeners by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace. And again, I want to close this episode the same way we started off. I apologize for the hiccup in the release of last week's episode. I hope it won't happen again. Hopefully we're back on track. But until then, please make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast on whatever platform that you listen to us on. Make sure that you're subscribed. Give us a 5-star rating and a written review on whatever platform you listen to us on. And hopefully good things are going to come from the move that we've made.
We expect good things to happen, Rick, and we certainly hope that's the case because our listeners deserve it.